Wouldn't it be amazing if right now we had a blueprint that we could take and use to develop any number of successful online communities? And the amazing thing is we have this blueprint. We've had this blueprint for a long time. What we just don't know that it's locked up in academia. When I first got into the online community space, when I was about 14 or 15 years old, like a lot of kids that age, I loved video games. And I got the internet at a young age, which is a really dangerous thing. And so I quickly discovered you could play games online, which I thought was the most incredible thing ever. But I quickly found that I wasn't so good at playing games, but I was very interested in all the communities that were growing up around these games. I noticed, and I was very lucky to notice, that the same elements are present in every online community. The same elements that work for one video gaming community work for every video gaming community. And if you can identify and isolate what these elements are, you can use this to build any number of successful online communities. And we've been lucky over the last 5 to 10 years to build our whole company based upon this. Not to focus on an approach that's led by technology, but to focus on an approach that's led by social sciences. And what I want to try and cover today are 2 or 3 specific things. The first, I want to cover the sense of community. Then I want to cover motivation. And then I want to talk a little bit about group identity. How do group identities form and develop? Why are they so important when it comes to developing successful communities? So let's begin with the sense of community. How many of you have heard of the sense of community as a concept? Not as a term, as a concept. 1 or 2. So the sense of community, more than anything else, is the most important thing you can do to understand, to build better online communities. The sense of community is the idea that people that are in a successful online community feel an extremely strong sense of community. People that are in a community feel they are part of that community. And this is really important. If I were to try and build an online community today, the very first thing I would look at would be to try and facilitate a stronger sense of community. I imagine that some people in here, from attending the last few meetings, feel a very strong sense of community with each other. But not everyone, and not everyone that attends will feel part of that community. However, tomorrow I'm at an event of community managers in the Netherlands, and they will feel a much stronger sense of community. They'll feel that because they have a sense of shared history with each other. They'll feel that because they know each other, they've met each other in the past. They'll feel that because there are a lot of things that they've done, they know each other, they've got that emotional connection with each other. The remarkable thing about the sense of community is that it has the strongest correlations with successful online communities, more so than any other concept. Last week, I was at a conference where I was listening to a man named John Coates. John Coates is the world's first online community manager. He was the community manager of The Well. So The Well, if you haven't heard of this, is the oldest online community in the world. It's about 27, 28 years old now. And what's amazing about The Well is that when he was telling the story of how it grew, how it developed, and all the people that were involved, the thing that shines through in this is the sense of community that they always felt with each other. The communities that last for years, not for months, have the strongest sense of community. The other amazing thing about the sense of community is that the communities with the most levels of activity, the communities where it's easier to recruit members to join the community, the communities with the highest levels of referrals, are those that feel the strongest sense of community. So it makes sense, if we want to build better and more successful online communities, to understand what this is. And it's nowhere near as complicated as what some people think. The amazing thing about sense of community is that it's broken down into 4 elements. And these are 4 elements that we can understand and we can use and we can manipulate to a certain extent to build very successful online communities. The first of these elements is membership. So the people that are in a community have a way of identifying who else is in that community. They have a boundary that they have crossed. They have some skills or some knowledge or some experience or something that they have done in their past, which means they can identify who is in that community and who isn't. I could go to a conference of doctors tomorrow. I could wear the white lab coat, but they would find within 30 seconds that I'm not a member of that community. They would know it because I wouldn't be able to use the same terms that they used. They would know it because I wouldn't have the same war stories. I wouldn't have gone through medical school. They would know very quickly that I wasn't a member of that community. One of the biggest mistakes I ever made came about 3 years ago. We were helping an organization develop an online community for people that love golf. And at the very last minute, the community manager dropped out, which is one of the worst things that can possibly happen. And since it was the last minute, I decided to step in. The problem with that is that I don't particularly know much about golf. I don't particularly like golf. I find golf one of the most boring things imaginable. Which makes it very hard for me to connect with someone that's really into golf. It makes it very hard for me to interact and use the right terms and speak in the right way. People in a community have that sense of membership. There's something that separates that community from the mainstream. And the important thing here is that there are things that you can do to manipulate this. There are things that you can do to build a much stronger sense of community by understanding how membership works. So the first one is that you can raise the boundary to being a member. So let me give you an example. So this is a community called Dr. Doc. It's a community that was launched by the British Medical Journal. And they found around September 2011 that this community was really struggling for growth and activity. And we looked at this and we decided that the problem was they were targeting every doctor in the whole world. And that doesn't work very well. These doctors might have something in common, but there's lots of competition in that space. There's Thermo, there's doctors.net. It's a really fierce competition. So we decided to change the focus of that community and raise the boundary to being a member of that community. We decided instead to focus on doctors that recently graduated from medical school. And there's no other community like this for doctors in the world. But we decided more specific than that. We focused specifically on doctors in the UK that had recently graduated medical school, because they have far more in common with each other. And since we did this, the levels of activity have continued to rise, I think every single month since we made this change. By raising the barrier to participating in a community, by making it a little more difficult to be an accepted member of that community, people feel they have much more in common with each other. And if they feel they have much more in common with each other, they're far more likely to continue participating in that community. They're far more likely to invite their friends to join the community. So you could launch a community for, say, HR professionals in the Netherlands, and it might work. Or you could launch a community for, say, people who run HR companies in the Netherlands, or people that are looking for HR jobs in the Netherlands. You can focus your community much better and have a much stronger boundary that people have to cross to be an accepted member of that community. Second is to encourage more personal investments. When we look at how local communities work, the people that are accepted members of that community are the people that have made a lot of contributions to that community. So what it means is that they've participated in community debates, they've been involved with the community activities, they're the ones that raise their hands at events, they help other people out. And this applies online as well. The amazing thing about online communities is that organizations always get a temptation to ask members to do too much. So when, for example, you're asking members to take a picture holding a logo of your brand on the top of the Eiffel Tower, that's too much. What you do need to be doing is focusing on tiny things that members can do to get more engaged in that community. It's these tiny personal investments that add up to a stronger sense of membership in a community. It's the tiny things like asking members for their opinion, asking them to participate in debates, asking them to vote on a poll. The more members contribute to a community in these tiny personal investments, the more likely they are to continue participating in that community. Third, rituals and traditions. Now, hazing as a concept is pretty much banned in every university in the UK now. But what it actually did was that it made people feel a much stronger sense of community. By going through hell or the most ridiculous forms of humiliation to be able to join a fraternity or a sports team, people that were in it felt a stronger sense of community with each other. It's what we call boundary maintenance. It makes the boundary very strong, and once you've gone through it, you feel a much stronger sense of connection with other people that have also gone through it. Now, obviously, in the communities that you're working with, you can't do anything anywhere near this extreme. So what can you do? Well, there are very simple things that you can implement in communities that work in a similar way to this. There are rituals and traditions that you can implement. What, for example, would happen if you ask members in your community to share their biggest mistake or the biggest challenge that they face? What rituals and traditions can you implement in your community that people have to go through when they join the community. Because if you do this right, once they go through this, once they go through these steps, go through that barrier, they feel a much stronger sense of community with other people. And finally, for membership, common symbol systems. So the reason why I would be found out so quickly if I went to a community of doctors or community for people that love golf is that I wouldn't be able to use the same terms and expressions that they use. What I mean by this is that people that are part of a community have ideas, they have words, they have symbols, they have things that mean something unique to that community, but something else entirely to other people. So what are the words and expressions that people in your community use that other people don't use? So let's try an example. Raise your hand if the term element 14 means much to you. Perfect, nobody. No, it's a good thing because it shouldn't do. But if this was a conference of design engineers, which I'd weirdly been invited to speak at, everyone would raise their hand. They would raise their hand and be like, yes, this is a product that we use all the time in our line of work. We recognize this. This is quite literally a symbol for that community. And so it's a very good idea in most communities to interview your members. It's a very good idea in most communities to come up with a list of terms, symbols, expressions, and other things that have a unique meaning to people inside the community, which don't mean much outside the community. Back when we were doing the video gaming communities, we didn't just have our own symbols, we had our own language at times. And this is also the reason why it makes sense if you're hiring someone to manage a community, hire someone that's really engaged in the topic. Don't find a community manager and bring that person in. Find someone that's into that topic, has a lot of existing connections, and turn them into a community manager. Because it's far easier to do that than it is to go the other way around. So next we have influence. And I got this slide before the announcement this week, by the way. People that participate in an online community, or the people that continue to participate in an online community, need to feel they have influence within that community. They need to feel that they have an impact within that community. If you make a contribution to a group or community that you're in today, and you don't feel it has any impact, you're not going to continue participating in that community. It's this efficacy. We want to feel that we make a difference in the groups that we're in. And the biggest mistakes that a lot of organizations make is that they don't share this level of influence at all. They keep it tightly controlled. So when you look at what Walmart Mums do, for example, this looks like it's a community that gives members a level of influence or impact within the community, but actually it doesn't. They're restricting to just their content and just what people can see there. If a member makes a great contribution in the comments, most people will never know about it. But when you look at communities that do influence really well, they give members so much recognition, so much attention, they give them a platform to have as much influence as possible. And it's so important that if you're developing a successful online community, that you both provide members with the opportunities to have influence, and you also amplify the level of influence that they do have. So what Mixcloud do really well is that they interview their top members. There's no reason that you can't give members plenty of opportunities to give their opinions and topics. There's no reason you can't give your members a lot of opportunities where they can shine or explain what they know or showcase what they're able to do. There are so many opportunities. You can have a place in your community where members can get more involved in running the community. There are so many things that you can do here. But the biggest mistake the brands do is that they tend to ignore this. They tend to have it really tightly controlled. And that's a big mistake. Mashable also do a good job of this. So Mashable, a huge site with millions of comments, but they highlight the best comments of the week. They don't highlight the people that made the most comments each week. They highlight the people that made the best comments that week. So that doesn't encourage everyone to participate as much as possible. It encourages them to make good quality contributions to that online community. Or what Element 14 do, and Element 14 is a terrific online community. If you're looking for a great example of an online community, element14.com is a good place to start. So what they do is that they find the experts in their online community. They find someone that has shown their expertise of what they can do, and then they give them their own place in that community. They give them a place in that community where people can come and ask questions. It's a very narrow niche, or niche if you're from the USA. It's a very narrow niche, but it scales up extremely well. You can find people in your online community that have a level of expertise in very small slices of that topic, and you can give them a place within your community where they can have that influence. And this shows members that not only can they also have that, it encourages them not only to share their expertise as well, it encourages them to also participate as much as possible so they can have their own place. Or Autodesk takes this even further. Autodesk, by the way, is another terrific online community for community managers. What they do is that they find people that have a level of expertise, and they give them their own blogs to share that level of expertise. They give them a regular place where people that really know what they're doing can share that expertise with everyone. Next, satisfying needs. People that participate in an online community want some level of reward from that participation. And I'm not talking about gamification here. They want a deep psychological reward from participating in that online community. And more so, their motivation for continuing to participate in that community has to align with what the community wants as well. But we're going to cover motivation a little bit later on, so I'm going to skip this just for now. And finally, for the sense of community, we're talking about the shared emotional connection. People that participate in online communities, or to put it even better, the strongest online communities have the strongest emotional connection. Strong online communities oscillate at the same emotional frequency. By that we mean that strong online communities are happy or sad or angry about the same things at the same time. And it's important that for online communities as well as offline communities, that you encourage this emotional connection with each other. So this picture, by the way, was taken the day after the London riots, about a year and a half ago. And what was interesting about the London riots, well, I mean, there were a lot of interesting things about the London riots, but what was interesting for me was that the day after the riots, there were some areas of London where people came out with their brooms and they cleaned that area up. And there were other areas of London where that didn't happen. There were areas of London where people just waited for the local council to clean it up. And they waited a long time for that to happen. So why does it happen in some areas but not other areas? According to the Guardian newspaper, the reason is that the areas where people came out in force to clean up their communities were areas where they felt a strong emotional connection to each other and a strong emotional connection to the community itself. The areas where people didn't have that, they didn't turn up, they didn't make any impact whatsoever in their local communities. They were apathetic. So it's important, if you're trying to develop a successful online community, that you spend a lot of time trying to encourage this emotional connection, that you make sure that you have the right types of discussions taking place, that you make sure that you're giving members a lot of opportunities to get to know other people that are participating in those communities. So there are some action points, things that you can do here. The first one is to initiate and highlight the most hardcore discussions. And by hardcore, what we mean here is that you should be initiating and highlighting the discussions that are perhaps the most technical, initiating or highlighting the discussions that are the most difficult to talk about, or if you run a community of interest, then talking about the things that are the most geekiest possible things to talk about. So for a Star Trek community, for example, you could have a debate about whether Spock could be Kirk in a fight, but that doesn't matter so much because it's not for you, it's for the people that are in that community. So a friend of mine runs a community for people that are affected by cancer. And one of the things she found is that the community was going okay, but there wasn't a real value that people were getting from the community. They were supposed to be supporting other people that were in that community, but they weren't really getting the benefits that they wanted from that community. And what we pushed her to do was to talk about the things that were most difficult to talk about. Talk about the things that people found really difficult to talk about. Initiate and highlight those sorts of discussions. And when we had those discussions, the really difficult things to talk about, we found that the level of activity started to go up. People began sharing more information about themselves. And this works across all different types of communities. Whether you're a community of practice, a community of interest, a community of action, a community of circumstance, it works across all types of communities. So you have to make sure in your online communities that you're highlighting these sorts of discussions. Next, make sure that you're encouraging discussions that get a lot of self-disclosure from members. Many organizations, when they try to develop an online community, they make sure that the conversations are only conversations that convey information. So I ask you a question and you give a response. The problem with that is that if people can only talk about the topic, then they can never get to really know each other. How can they really get to know the other people in the community if they're restricted to just conveying information with each other? And communities where they limit discussions to just conveying information have very lower levels of activity compared to the types of communities where members can talk about other things, where they can reveal information about themselves. So by self-disclosure discussions, we're talking about the types of discussions where members can share what they think or feel about different things, where they can share the things that they've done in the past, where they can talk about what they are most passionate about, what they're most angry about. We talk about the types of discussions that build a really strong sense of connection amongst people. And finally, we have allowing non-topic or off-topic discussions. This is for the same reason as self-disclosure discussions. Members want to talk about the things that they want to talk about. And when organizations try to go against this, they're fighting against a tide here. Awkward. So when... That was a... This is really bad for you now. So when members want to talk about certain things, it makes sense to go with that. Because if you do that, you're going to get much more activity as a result. So there's some great examples of this in action. So one of the things we found with the Doc community, this community for doctors, is that the client, the BMJ, and they gave me permission to talk about this, I'm not just revealing their secrets here. The client only wanted those doctors to share good advice with each other. So what should you do in this situation with this disease, or how should you deal with this issue, or stuff like that. And we found that the doctors didn't really want to talk about that. What they did want to talk about are these really ethical issues. What do you do if you know if a patient is lying to you? What do you do if you know that there's some sort of situation that you have to deal with, but your code of practice prevents it? We found that they really wanted to talk about these ethical issues. The most popular discussion ever to take place in this community was this one right here. It was whether it was okay to use medical care to track down bin Laden. Now there is absolutely no value in this for the client whatsoever. And there's no value to the participants other than they get to connect with each other. They get to really feel that they know each other. And what we found is that when we allow these types of discussions, when we allow the types of discussions where members could talk about whatever they want, share their off-topic advice, or just talk about the ethical issues they face, that the level of activity continued to rise. But also members began participating in these conveying information discussions more as well. Now for sure, it was a much smaller percentage of all the discussions that were taking place, but it's also much more than what they had originally. So when you get members to know each other on a personal level, the level of activity continues to rise significantly. And this goes for so many types of communities of practice. So what you see here, for example, this is a community for social care workers. And the most popular discussion that's taken place is a discussion where people can express their anger at government decision. Now, from a community of practice perspective, they're not getting any real information out of this. But from a social perspective, from a group bonding perspective, from a perspective of increasing activity to that community, from getting people to visit your community more often, this makes a lot of sense. So these types of discussions make a lot of sense to that community. And these people are all angry about the same thing at the same time. And that makes a big impact upon that community. They feel a much stronger connection as a result. Anger can be as good a tool as happiness or joy for building a successful online community. Another thing that works well is when members get their pride involved in an online community. There are certain types of discussions which we see in so many types of online communities that we can only conclude there's something about that discussion itself that makes it very useful for the online community. So one of these are to show off what you've done, or tell us about your biggest success, or tell us how you handled this issue, where members can show off what they can do in that community, where members can say what they've achieved, or they can show off what they do, and it creates that social order in the community. It lets people get their pride and their emotions engaged in that community. they're far more likely to continue participating in that community, far more likely to get more involved in that topic as well, just so they can keep showing off what they've done. And there are only so many places in the world where you can talk about hardcore discussions like this. There are only so many places in the world where you can talk about current detection with an Allegro ACS756 on an 18 MHz 328. Who knows what that's talking about? Awesome. Now that makes a lot of sense, but if you're in this space, if you understand this topic, then these sorts of discussions are those you want to see. There are only so many places in the world where you can talk about things like this. If you brought it up at the cocktail party, you'd be deemed insane, right? But in this community, it's perfect for them. Or my absolutely favorite one of all time. How many of you have heard of this, by the way? Awesome. I get to tell you a story. There are only so many places in the world where you can have a 40,000 word discussion about whether you should capitalize the I on the new Star Trek film, Star Trek Into Darkness. 40,000 word discussion. The Wikipedia editors, this isn't like the Star Trek geeks who don't care that much. It's the Wikipedia editors. These busy Wikipedia editors who have so many articles to edit, so many things to do, spent 40,000 words discussing whether they should capitalize I on Star Trek Into Darkness. Now, for the rest of society, that's absolutely insane, right? But for the Wikipedia editors, they love it. They enjoy getting involved in these sorts of debates. It makes a lot of sense for them. For them, this is their sorts of communities. So when you push the community towards those sorts of discussions, those types of discussions that you can't have anywhere else, you get the right sorts of activities that you want. You get the right sort of members that you want. And it makes a lot of sense to do that. So next, let's talk about motivation. I love this picture, by the way. There's an amazing story behind it. So let's talk about motivation. Most organizations don't quite understand why people participate in online communities. They think they do, but they're usually wrong. The other thing I see at a lot of conferences, so let me ask you a question. How many of you know who this is? I'm just trying to ask the most difficult questions possible. This is Abraham Maslow. You might recognize this instead. Wow. So what tends to happen is that when we talk about motivation, we talk about the 70-year-old concept and try and apply it to online communities. Now this is crazy because it's not meant to be applied to online communities. There's a lot of academic data that refutes this. So let's put this aside for now. What we need to understand about motivation is this, and this is really important. People join a community for one reason, but they continue participating in a community for another reason. People usually join a community to satisfy their need for information. So there's usually something that they find about the community that they want. There's some information that they want from that community. Now this shouldn't surprise anyone in this room, I don't think. No one right now is looking to join an online community, or at least very few people are looking to join an online community. Because if you're not in a community, you don't know what you're missing. But a lot of people are looking for information, and they might stumble upon your community as a result of that. The problem that brands make, or that organizations make, is that they keep people in this motivational mindset. They keep people in that mindset where people only want information. They have that top-down role where people only want information. So compare this right here, the HR Business Network, and I really hope there's no one from these sites because it's really awkward. And then compare that to HR.com. Let's do it again. This is the HR Business Network, and this is HR.com. Now, if you're on this community here, this is a community that's designed for people to get information. It's still an online community, and it's designed for people to get information. So when people find the information, they only visit again when they want more information. When people visit this community, you can see it shows the new members there. You can see that the latest member content. You can see the latest discussions. You can see who the top members are. This community is designed to socialize people in that community. This community is designed to get people coming back to the community to see what's new with other people. This community is designed to get that peer group going, but people continue visiting the community because they want to see what their peers are doing. And that's an incredibly powerful thing. If members only visit your community when they want information, they usually only visit your community when they have a particular problem that they're trying to solve. And that might not be that often. And that might be once a month, that might be once a year, it might not be that often. But if they continue visiting your community to see what's new, then that's far more powerful. They can visit your community every day, 3 times a day, or 10 times a day. So you want the right sorts of things taking place in your community to facilitate that. What GiftGaff do, is Vincent here, by the way? Hey. What Vincent does is a really good job at GiftGaff is that, I don't know whether he's going to say it or not later on, is that he socializes people in the community. People might come to that community because they have a problem with their mobile network service that they're trying to solve, but they continue participating in that community because they get to know other people in the community. It becomes part of their group identity. They keep visiting that community again and again because it's just part of who they are. It's part of the crowd that they want to be a part of. And you can get people far more engaged and participating far more frequently in your online community if you get this basic motivational stuff right. It makes far more sense to get people participating in a community. Have you guys seriously not seen this?
Yeah.
This is like the oldest image I could find on the internet. So you want people to go to your community because they want to satisfy their social needs, not just their informational needs. They can continue getting their informational needs too, that's fine, but you need to socialize these people in the community. You need them continuing to visit your community because their ego is invested in the community. They want to impress the other people in the community. A lot of the activities that take place in your community take place because members are trying to impress other people in that community. You want people participating in this community because they have that need for validation. They want to seek positive opinion about themselves. So imagine if I think I'm a terrific community manager and I post great articles about community management and people say, wow, Rich, you're an absolutely amazing community manager. Those are the sorts of opinions that I would want that validation about. You also want members participating because they want to have an impact, their efficacy. You want them participating because they have their self-esteem partly invested in the community. These motivations for getting people to visit almost every day are far more powerful than just conveying information. And finally, some people participate in the community to make friends. That sounds quaint, but it's true. So what you need to do is shift the balance of discussions in your community away from those who just convey information, and more than this, you need to shift the structure of your community away from just conveying information to the sorts of discussions that encourage that self-disclosure, to the sorts of discussions we were talking about earlier where people can really get to know each other, where their ego and their social needs are being satisfied as much as their need for information. You don't just want a community for people that are seeking information. But you can't go too far here. So this community here is a community for kids, and it's absolutely crazy to go this far. They have languages that don't make sense. I don't think they share anything interesting whatsoever. But you can get it just right. You can have a community that mixes the balance between people that want information and people that want to satisfy their social needs as well. In the communities we work with, we typically go for a balance of about 20% conveying information and about 80% of discussions that let people become more engaged and involved in the community. They self-disclose and they can share their opinions. But you can balance this extremely well in pretty much every type of online community we've seen. So the key takeaway here, when people join your community, socialize them in the community. When they join for information, get them as quickly as possible, getting their ego and their social needs engaged in that community. So for example, when they join the community, take them to a topical discussion as the very next page that they go to that's taken place that you want their opinion on. Or a few days later, use an autoresponder where you can tell them a little bit more about the community. You can tell them more about who the top members of the community are. You can tell them more about the vision of the community. You can gradually ease members in to getting more engaged about that community. And finally, how much time do we have? 2 minutes, perfect. So I want to talk about social identity theory. So social identity is basically that we get a lot of our identity or our self-identity from the groups that we are a part of. And this is important because, well, let me give you an example. So 2 weeks ago, someone asked me how they can get their members to join, or their audience, to join a struggling online community. And the answer is you can't, because no one wants to join a struggling online community. No one wants to associate their identity with something that's not going well. There's an amazing study done at university where their college football team lost. And the next day, there weren't that many people that were wearing the jersey of that college team. But when they win, many more people are. People want to associate themselves with groups that are successful. So if your community isn't that successful, you need to make sure that it looks like it is. And now, I'm not talking about being misleading here. I'm talking about closing down the areas of your community which aren't going well. Making sure that your community doesn't look empty. I'm talking about finding small milestones that your community can achieve. And if you do this right, far more people want to associate their identity with your community identity. You can have that vision for the community that people are working towards. You can lay out the single steps. So that might be having your 10th member join. That might just be a summary of what members have achieved in the community so far, or a summary of how members have helped other people in the community. There are a lot of things that you can do here. But if your community is struggling, you need to try and make sure that it looks like it isn't struggling. And that doesn't mean being misleading. It means breaking it down and finding things that they can achieve, even in that size. And if your community is going well, it makes sense to showcase how well that community is going. So what you see on this community platform here is that they showcase how many discussions are taking place. They showcase the latest discussions on the landing page of that community. You can always see fresh content and new things and new people in that community. But even if you have a community that's just launched, you can launch with very small areas in the community. You can have small milestones that the community aims to hit. And it's not that difficult to achieve. It's basic community organizing, but you have to break it down any major goal that you want to achieve into really small single steps. So that pretty much wraps up the talk here we have time, perfect. I have a book, Buzzing Communities, which you can buy on Amazon.com. Do we have time for questions, or do you have to?
We have time. And I already received 2 questions on Twitter. So first I'm going to Patrick. He has 1 question. Do you remember, or yeah?
Hi, Rich. I love the stuff you're doing about social behavior and not about technology. But you're talking about sort of utopian or church-like communities. And I think most companies, they just want fans and conversion and not people who are active all the time, long term.
I love that question so much. I think you're half right. So we get this rejection a lot. So you're talking about these utopian communities. Most branded online communities now fail. Most branded communities don't reach that critical mass where they have enough members and enough activity to succeed. And they do that because they treat communities, they're too cynical about their communities. And what I mean by that is that if you have a community where people can really get to know each other, they participate far more. The thing is that we've got some data on now is that the communities with the highest levels of return on investment are also the communities with the strongest sense of community. These are the communities where people continue visiting that community again and again. So for example, people that tend to spend more money as a result of the community, people that increase their spending on that brand after they join the community, is because they get more engaged in that sense of community. So they get to know each other and they participate in activity more often. When we participate in communities, our interest in that activity increases. Does that make sense? And so as a result, that's usually a good thing for most brands. I think most organizations are too cynical about what their members can do, and I understand that because they have this mindset where it's always being one to many, as I'm sure we've heard about a billion times at billion conferences. But we know there are certain principles that you can apply to pretty much any communities to increase the levels of growth, increase the levels of activity, and increase the sense of community. And the benefits that we find from that have been incredible. We wouldn't have any work if it wasn't. But that's a good question. That is the question that should be asked.
I'm looking for Maurice. Maurice, yeah.
Hi, Rich. When we try to improve our website, we use A/B testing, we use persuasion techniques, kind of stuff. Are you using that kind of technique on your community?
We get a lot of data. So before we do any work with a client, the first thing we do, and the first thing that any community manager should do when they start a new job, is benchmark where you are now. Otherwise, you have no defensible base to grow from.
And how is that benchmark? Is that lots of discussions, lots of members?
This could be a whole another talk, but we use 3 different metrics. We use what for? We use the levels of growth, so the number of active members within the previous 30 days. We use the levels of activity, the number of contributions that have been made, and the number of contributions per member as well. And then we use the sense of community, which we get from the survey called the Sense of Community Index, which you can look up on the internet. And finally, we look at the return on investment, which is a complicated formula that will take a long time to explain. But we make sure we have real financial metrics as a result, not engagement likes or any of that crap. We have real financial metrics as a result. Does that help?
Testing with persuasion kind of stuff?
So let me give you an example of what we do. When we say have an issue with the BMJ, the British Medical Journal, one of our clients, we look at their current levels of growth and activity and their sense of community. And we find it's low. Particularly, for example, the sense of community was incredibly low. And we design an intervention that we're going to make in that community. So it might be increasing the sense of community by increasing that boundary, so who we're targeting. It might be allowing those off-topic discussions and spending more time on that. And then we measure each month what the difference has been. So it gives you a pretty clear graph of where it's going.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. I wanted to follow up a little bit on what you said in your comment to Maurice's question. What we see now is that a lot of branded communities or brands have communities on Facebook, or say they have like a community on Facebook. And we have a lot of discussions about that with other community managers. What's your take on Facebook as a community platform?
I'm going to be killed. Sorry. So Facebook is a great platform for building an audience. It's a great platform for building a lot of people that can hear about you. But when you look at what most Facebook communities are doing, those people generally don't interact with each other. They usually respond to the person that's posting a comment, but there isn't that much discussion with each other. That's not true of every Facebook fan page, but our definition of a community is a group of people who have developed strong relationships around strong common interests. So that excludes Facebook because these people generally don't interact with each other that often. So a Facebook page is terrific if you want, say, as much reach as possible, perhaps. But in terms of getting people that are really engaged in the community, for people that are likely to increase their spending as a result, we've always found that community to be far better than that. So I'm genuinely not a fan of social media that much. I think social media is great for reminding people about the community and bringing people into the community, but I wouldn't put my community on Facebook.
Does the same apply to the Google Plus community?
I haven't spent enough time with it, to be honest. I don't really have that much of an opinion.
There's your answer.
Sorry?
There's your answer. Haven't spent any time there. Probably interesting.
Perhaps. I don't like to give an opinion on something that I don't know much about. Perhaps not. So I can't help.
Okay, we have another question over here.
I'm thinking about maybe taking over a community forum that's not branded and changing it into a branded community. Is that ethical or possible? Do you have any experience with that?
It's risky.
I know, so we might not do it.
What do your members think about it?
We are sponsoring the forum and we did invite them over and they love the company, but I haven't gone so far as to suggest taking it over. But I do know the owner doesn't make any living this way and he's thinking about making it something he could live on.
So you can monetize communities and you can sponsor them, but there's the obvious issue there that members might not like that. But there's also an amazing opportunity there to make that community much better than it is, to use the resources that your organization has to really improve that community. So for example, to have more events, to have exclusive news posted there, to give the top members, say, products or samples of what you sell or do, or to give people a real voice of what happens in that organization. So the ways of using your organization resources to make that community much better. Or there's a way of spamming the community and telling members how great the brand is, which is going to drive everyone away. So it's good luck.
Okay.
So after you heard this, what do you think your next step is going to be for the community?
Well, when I came here, I thought community was a no-no because we don't have enough hands and time. But now I'm starting to see it could be the next step. So, but I have no idea in which direction we would take it, the branding community or taking over forum.
Here's what I would do. I would create a post and make it a sticky thread in the community, asking what can we do to help you, and just leave it at that and see what response you get.
Okay, good idea.
Does anybody else have a question? Because we have like an extra 10 minutes till the next session starts. Yeah, I know, and maybe people want to go to the, I know, maybe people want to go to the toilet, but still, like, bring it on. Questions? Anybody? No? I cannot imagine that Tom doesn't have a question for Richard with the whole Airbnb experience that you have.
You're from Airbnb?
Yeah, he's from Airbnb. Do you have a question for Tom?
No, I just love those.
Ah, I know. I love your community as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I came in a little late. I might have to approach.
You came late?
Yeah.
I just slightly. I apologize.
Yeah, but more people came late because they saw all the positive tweets about your session, and they actually came from other rooms to hear you talk about.
I got a question. How do you, because a lot of examples that you've shown, I think, are from existing communities that are being built upon.
Yeah.
How do you do when you start from scratch with absolutely just an idea, basically? How do you get to grow a community that isn't there yet? How do you get new?
You can give me a call. No, on a serious note, how much time do we have? About 10 minutes? Yeah. Awesome. So what I would do if I'm starting an online community from scratch is first I would look on various social media channels and make a list of people that might be interested in that topic. Try and build up a list of say 50 to 100, this is what we do. Build up a list of say 50 to 150 individuals. Then I would begin interviewing or reaching out to each one of them and trying to build some relationships with them initially and finding out specifically what they're most interested in. What are the biggest challenges that they face, what are their aspirations, what are their hopes, what are the things they spend most of the time doing, and then build a community around that concept. Make sure the community is either about solving an issue they have, or make sure that it's not just another online community, but something specific about the community. Because if you launch a community today, it has to be a little more specific than what form the community is to be. And then once you have those relationships with them, once you've interviewed them, you can ask them, do you want to be one of the founding members of this community? And that has a much more of a powerful thing than just saying, do you want to join the community? So once they're one of the founding members of the community and they invited them, then we'd be thinking about doing a little more with them. So giving them more control over areas of the community, asking if they want to create content for the community, be in charge of, say, subtopics for that community of their level of expertise. Then we might say, let everyone invite one of their friends to join the community, which we don't use by technology. I mean, if they invite more, that's terrific. But if everyone does invite one friend, then you have 100% growth. What you're looking for at this stage is to reach that critical mass, which is when more than 50% of growth and activity in the community is generated by the community. It's really weird looking down on me. So what we generally do at this stage is we make sure we have a lot of activity per member, and we focus on a very core number of members, say 150 to perhaps 300, and try and reach that stage where we reach critical mass. Because every big online community begins as a small online community. And organizations often try to skip that stage and just get as many people to join the community as quickly as possible in the hopes that it takes off. But you want a relatively small group of people there that are active, and then you build upon that. So it's a slow, steady growth rather than an explosion of growth, which is what you want.
Is that covered in the book also?
Everything you want to know is everything.
Perfect. Did you bring books?
No, I haven't tried it. I don't want to be carrying boxes of books. You can all buy it.
Yeah, I know. Buy them on Amazon. Okay.